Recording in progress.
The House Chairperson.
There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. We may be seated. I will now request the secretary to read the first order of the day.
Consideration of recommendation of candidate nominated to fill a vacancy in Electoral Commission.
I will now invite the Honorable Chabani, the chairperson of the committee, to introduce the report.
Thank you, House Chair, Deputy President, honorable members. The Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs, having considered a request to the National Assembly by the Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Chief Justice Zondo, to nominate a suitable candidate to fill the vacancy in the IEC, shortlisted and conducted interviews by a panel established in terms of Section 6, subsection 3 of the Electoral Commissions Act of 1996. The panel was chaired by the Chief Justice, with other members, the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, the chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality, and the public protector. Out of 70 applicants received, the panel shortlisted 12 for interviews, and subsequently, the Chief Justice submitted a shortlist of 8 candidates and their curricula vitae to the Speaker for consideration to fill the vacancy in the Electoral Commission in no particular order of preference. Ms. J. Love, Advocate Josie, Ms. B. Zulu, Ms. S. Ntembu, Dr. Dintwe, Mr. Mtimde, Ms. Badihien, and Ms. Mabuza. The recommendation were referred to the Portfolio Committee on the 27th July 2023 by the Speaker for consideration and report. On the 12th September 2023, the committee deliberated on the recommended candidates, informed by the interviews during the panel of the Chief Justice, and the experience informed by the committee deliberated on the recommended candidates, informed by the interviews during the panel of the Chief Justice, and experience in the field of work, and resolved to recommend the name of Ms. Jeanette Love for appointment as a Commissioner for IEC. The committee considered continuity in that Commissioner Love has served the IEC and she was a deputy chairperson at some point. The committee also considered her academic qualifications as well as her experience in the public service. The committee also took into consideration our national agenda of building an unracial, non-sexist society, that which will be reflected in the appointment of Commissioner Love. In this regard, we present the report to the of the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs and recommend that this House approve for the appointment of Commissioner Love to serve as a commissioner for the Independent Electoral Commission. I thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Chabani. May I now recognize the political parties that wish to make declarations, starting with the DA?
Thank you, House Chair. In 2022, a conference on safeguarding election management bodies in the age of global democratic recession reported that a number of emerging democracies, including South Africa, have been in a steep decline in the quality of democracy. The IEC report on the 2021 local government elections to the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs on the 20th of May 2022 did not even mention voter management device failures as a challenge faced in the election. Failures in these systems resulted in around 140,000 voters who had changed their registration, finding they had in fact not been changed and being unable to vote on election day. So it's staggering that this wasn't even noted as a challenge. Furthermore, the DA received complaints from over 150 voting stations on election day, where the voter management device failed, causing long queues and leading voters to leave queues in frustration, denying them their democratic rights. Now, the INC admitted that they first tested these devices on registration weekend, despite insisting before the elections that these devices had been tested and a backup process was in place. Then there was the reopening of the registration for new candidates after the closing date, after the governing ANC stood to lose out on contesting 93 municipalities. This followed the washable ink debacle in the 2019 national and provincial elections as the latest in a series of events threatening the credibility of our elections. President Ramaphosa was rightly criticized after congratulating the Zimbabwean government for organizing and holding, and I quote, harmonized elections. We cannot allow this to be our standard. We cannot allow this to be our standard. The DA supports the candidature of Ms. Janet Yetta Love as the most experienced and capable candidate, serving as IEC Commissioner since 2016 and Vice Chairperson of the IEC since 2018, and making solid contributions in her role. The DA wishes Ms. Love well and will step up its oversight role to hold the IEC to account to ensure free and fair elections. Thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
House Chairperson, the EFF chose to abstain from supporting any of the candidates that were presented to the committee. Our position is informed by a number of concerns we have with the IEC, which we have consistently raised on various platforms. The IEC is tasked with, among other issues, to compile and maintain the voters' roll and promote voter education in South Africa. South Africa has over 40 million people who are eligible to vote, but out of this, only 26 million are registered to vote, which means close to 15 million South Africans who are of voting age are not registered to vote. The IEC has failed to reach out to these 15 million eligible voters and get them to register to vote. Majority of them are young people between the ages of 17 to 34 years, and they account for over 54% of people who are eligible to vote, but are not registered to vote. We are firmly opposed to the use of SADC-affiliated members as presiding officers in our voting stations, as such people have openly declared that they have taken the side of the ruling party. Their continued employment as presiding officers, particularly in the upcoming highly contested election, has the potential to discredit the supposed independence of the IEC from political meddling. Some of these SADC deployees are poorly trained and always provide conflicting interpretation to legislation at voting stations, which ends up confusing ordinary voters. We call for the employment of millions and thousands of unemployed youth to serve as presiding officers in our elections. This will not only provide them with an income, but also with skills. As we approach what is likely going to be the most highly contested election since 1994, which will see the ruling party lose elections for the first time in 30 years, the independence and credibility of the IEC will be very critical. We have seen what happens in some African countries and in other parts of the world when the body charged with managing elections is staffed with conflicted individuals who are surrogates of the ruling party, deployed to manipulate internal processes for the sake of protecting the ruling party. We are concerned by the recent austerity measures which government has announced and what their impact may be on the ability of the IEC to execute its duties ahead of the 2024 elections. We call for more funding for the IEC to conduct voter awareness campaign, get more young people registered to vote, and to be able to conduct free and fair elections. Thank you.
Thank you. The IFP.
Honorable Chair, Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP supports and welcome the recommendation. Thank you very much. Inkatha Freedom Party, IFP, support and welcome the recommendation to the reappoint Ms. J.Y. Live to Electoral Commission IEC. Since Ms. Love joined the IEC as a part-time commissioner in 2016, and then as a full-time vice chairperson in 2018, she has shown herself to be competent and passionate and professional. Among others, prior to joining the IEC, Ms. Love serves as a part-time member of South African Human Rights Commission and was a member of Convention for Democratic South Africa, CODESA, management team. She also served as a national director of the Legal Resource Center. These roles not only provided her with a solid foundation in working in the both administration and Chapter 9 institution, but also speak of her deep commitment to our constitutional democracy and our Bill of Rights. The 2024 election will potentially prove to be the most contested and the most challenging in our history. This is due to challenge of legislation and the fact that there might be widespread the IFP support.
Thank you. Tatana Bilangkul. Ay, siyakubawa. Ako icime. FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chair. Agbare huisvoorsitter. Suid-Afrikaners het hulle vertroue in die Suid-Afrikaanse politiek en politieke bedeling verloor. En laastempuntrone kan landwyd gesien word die afgelope 2019 landwyse verkiesing en ook met die plaaslike owerheidsverkiesing van 2021. Dit is ons taak as openbare amptbekleers om hierdie vertroue te herstel by die kieserspubliek. En ons het soveel te meer nog belangrik dat die onafhanklike verkiesingskommissie as 'n geloofwaardige instelling sal bly voortbestaan. Volgende jaar in die 2024 algemene verkiesing vind daar 'n waterskeidingsverkiesing plaas en speel die OVK of terwyl die onafhanklike verkiesingskommissie 'n sentrale rol. Die aanstelling van mevrou Janet Love as kommissaris van die kommissie word deur die VF+ ondersteun. Dankie voorsitter.
Baie dankie. ACDP,
Thank you, House Chair. The ACDP supports the report. Thank you.
thank you. UDM. UDM. ATM. Good. Good. NFP. NFP. AIC.
Good day, Chairperson. I will keep, sorry, can you hear me, Chairperson?
Yes, I can proceed.
Yes, thank you
Honorable
very-
Councillor.
Yes, thank you very much. The National Freedom Party notes the recommendation of Ms. Janet Yetta Love for the appointment to fill a vacancy in the IEC. We also note that the committee itself, the portfolio committee, has deliberated and identified Ms. Janet Yetta Love as the ideal candidate, given the fact that she's been a civil servant, an activist, a former politician who served as the vice chairperson of the Electoral Commission of South Africa since 2018, clearly indicating that she has the necessary capacity, expertise, and of course, the integrity to hold such office. Before her appointment to the Electoral Commission, she was a part-time South African human rights commissioner. She was also a media profile during apartheid. Ms. Love was a member of Mkhonto Sizwe and work on should not be part and parcel of the recommendations that we're making. Having considered that she's a suitable candidate by virtue of her expertise, her skills, the fact that she's got experience in this particular field, the National Freedom Party is of the opinion that she is the ideal candidate. However, we want to stress that the IEC must at some stage put together a conflict resolution committee to deal with political party infighting, which is costing millions of taxpayers' money. And in this way, I think we might be able to identify timelessly and solve the problems that exist in political parties. The NFP will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. The IEC.
Thank you, the AIC Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. As the African Independent Congress, we support the endorsement of the candidature of Ms. Love, who joined the Electoral Commission as part-time commissioner in April 2016, and then as vice chairperson in 2018. Her independence and qualifications are unquestionable. Ms. Love had various stints with the South African Reserve Bank, the Legal Resource Center, and the Human Rights Commission. We have no doubt that she will be part of cohort of independent-minded commissioners who will deliver free and fair elections in 2024. We trust her impartiality. We must never take for granted the fairness of any elections outcomes, especially given the history of our country. Ms. Love understands the role of the IEC in our democracy and will carry her role with integrity. We support her candidature. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Jafta of the African Independent Congress. Thank you. Cope.
Thank you, Chair. We support the recommendation of Ms. Love as the suitable candidate.
Thank you. PAC.
Honorable Chair, the PAC supports the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Al-Jama.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, I spent a week with Mrs. Love on the visit to Namibia to look at better ways with regard to our elections, and we looked at devices, and I was very impressed the way she engaged with the lawmakers there to show that she's open to next generation opportunities and interventions for free and fair elections. So Al-Jama will certainly support the nomination and the report, and we thank the chairman for the report. However, we are still concerned that if you look at the mix of commissioners, there seems to be a gap when it comes to those who have a lot of experience with the youth. As you know, the young people don't want to register as voters. Secondly, IT knowledge and security knowledge seems to be a gap, because the governing party and the official opposition still know how to outsmart the IEC to manipulate the results. You just speak to Bantu Alamisa and we'll tell you what they do. And then obviously, we also feel that one needs to look at something better than just manual voting. Al-Jamaa supports the report and wishes Mrs. Love everything of the best in her new term.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The ANC support the nomination of Ms. Janet Love to serve as a commissioner of the Independent Electoral Commission, following the process undertook by the Chief Justice in terms of Section 6 of the Electoral Commission Act 51 of 1996. In this regard, we join the chairperson of the Popular Committee on Home Affairs to commend the important work done by the Office of the Chief Justice in setting up a panel, shortlisting the nominated candidates, and making recommendation on suitable individual to be considered for the position of Commissioner of the IEC. Commissioner Love brings a strong academic qualification that include a Bachelor of Degree in Political Science and Industrial Psychology, a Master's degree in Public Finance Management from the University of London, and a number of postgraduate diplomas from Best University. Commissioner Janet Love brings a wealth experience in public service. Before she served as a member of the National Assembly, Commissioner Love served the country in various capacities, including being part of the Correctional negotiations, also being a member of the Constitutional Assembly that gave birth to our Constitution today. Commissioner Love has a wealth of cooperative experience, as she currently serving in various boards, including being a chairperson of the University of KwaZulu-Natal Health, Economic and AIDS Research Division, and of a member of the board of CEF Africa Audit, among others. As currently a commissioner of IEC, we believe that the IEC requires continuity, that an individual such as Ms. Janet Love possesses an experience to serve in this important Chapter 9 institution that is responsible for ensuring the organization and running a credible, free, and fair election. Commissioner Love is a woman who contributed to the liberation of the people. She was part of playing our constitutional democracy, a dedicated and committed patriot. Through her appointment to be a commissioner of the IEC, this parliament will affirm its unwavering commitment to the creation of non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. Our country and its people will benefit from Commissioner Love's experience, and she will contribute to the strengthening of our constitutional democracy by being part of the IEC that ensures that our country continues to enjoy free, fair, and credible election. The African National Congress stands in support of the recommendation for Commissioner Janet Love to serve as a commissioner of the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Honorable members, the question before the House is that the nomination of Ms. J.Y. Love for the appointment to fill a vacancy in the Electoral Commission be approved. Are there any objections to the nomination? Honorable members, in terms of Section 1935B(2) of the Constitution 1996, read with the 6(2)(c) of the Electoral Commission Act number 51 of 1996, the person nominated for appointment to serve on the Electoral Commission must be approved by a majority of members of the assembly. Although a division has not been demanded, members are required to record their support for the recommendation. The majority is 201, honorable members. The bells will be rung for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Honorable members, the Speaker has determined that in accordance with the rules, a manual voting procedure will be used for this division. Firstly, in order to establish a quorum, I will request the table to confirm that we have a requisite number of members physically present in the chamber and on the virtual platform to take this decision. Party whips will then be given an opportunity to confirm the number of their members present and indicate if they vote for or against the question. A member who wishes to abstain or vote against the party vote may do so by informing the chair. Honorable members, we have confirmed that we do have a quorum. As such, we proceed. The question before the House is that the House approves the nomination of Ms. J.Y. Love to serve on the Electoral Commission. The voting will now commence. The doors to the chamber will be locked and members will not be allowed to enter the virtual platform until the voting is concluded. May I ask the whips to confirm the number of their members present in the chamber and on the virtual platform and indicate if they vote for or against the question. Those that are not sure of their numbers on the platform, the table staff will be able to assist. Are party whips ready to record their votes? The ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair, honorable members. The ANC on a virtual platform is 150. Here physically, we are 40, totaling up to 190 voting in support. Thank you.
Thank you. The DA?
House Chair, in the House, we are 17. On the virtual platform, we are 54, 71 voting in support.
Thank you. The EFF?
House Chair?
Yes, Ma'am Kalipi.
In the House, we are 3. On the platform, we are 21, but we are not sure because the table staff must confirm, but we are abstaining as the EFF on this matter.
21 plus 3 is 24. Let me just check with the table staff if they can affirm you are 21. Is that so? Okay, we'll come back to that. Oh, it's 17, not 21. So it's 17 plus 3, which gives us 20 that abstains. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. The IFP?
House Chairperson, 3 in the House, 3 on the platform and support.
Thank you. Did they hear you? Did you catch? Babuhlengwa? Babuhlengwa? Yekela labo khuluma nami. Abakuzwanga kahle.
Chairperson, 3 in the House, 3 on the platform and support.
3 in the House, 3 on the platform. It's 6. Thank you. FF plus?
Dankie, huisvoorsitter. Ons is 3 op die virtuele platform, 5 in die huis, dis 8 in ondersteuning.
8 ondersteun. ACDP?
Thank you, House Chair. The ACDP is 2 on the platform, 1 in the House, 3 in support. Thank you.
Thank you. The UDM? Not here. ATM? Good. NFP?
Chair, 1 online in support.
Thank you. AIC?
1 on the virtual platform, Chair, and in support.
Thank you. Co?
1 virtual and 1 support.
Thank you. PAC?
PAC 1 in support.
Thank you. Al-Jama?
Al Jama 1, and we support.
Thank you. Are there any members that wishes to abstain or vote differently to their parties? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. Thank you. These are the outcomes. Abstentions, we have 20. Noes, we have 0. And the ayes, we have 283. 283. The question of the nomination of Ms. J.Y. Love for appointment to serve on the Electoral Commission is accordingly agreed to. So we proceed, honorable members, and I will now ask the secretary to read the second order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on Judicial Matters Amendment Bill.
I will now invite the Honorable Magwanisha, the chairperson of the committee, to introduce the report on the bill.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, His Excellency the Deputy President, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party, Honorable Members. The bill proposes to address practical and technical issues of non-contentious nature, making amendments to numerous acts administered by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. This includes proposed amendments to the Matrimonial Property Act of 1984, the Interstate Succession Act of 1987, and Maintenance of Surviving Spouse Act of 1990 to comply with the Constitutional Court judgments in Sithole and another of 2021, and Buanya versus the Master of the High Court of Cape Town and others 2021 respectively. The bill also proposes to repeal the common law crime of defamation. The committee particularly welcomes the insertion of new sections, Section 57B, Section 57C, and Section 57D into the Criminal Procedure Act of 1977. These provisions will assist to clear the names of those who earned criminal records after having paid admissions of guilt fines for breaching COVID-19 lockdown regulations. Specifically, Section 57B proposes that the minister may declare that certain categories of offenses do not result in a previous conviction against the accused and provides for expungement of minor offenses, as well as certain offenses committed in terms of the Disaster Management Act of 2002. The proposed new Section 57C provides for the expungement of the criminal records of persons whose names appear in the records of the Criminal Record Center after having paid admissions of guilt fines. The objective of the amendment is to provide for automatic expungement of criminal records. I now table the report for your kind consideration, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party, what do we do with the report? The Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that the House adopt this report. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. Can the secretary read the third order?
Second reading, Judicial Matters Amendment
Thank you.
Bill.
Now I will recognize the political parties wishing to make a declaration. The DA.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. The primary aim of the Judicial Matters Amendment Bill is to amend numerous acts which are administered by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development and are intended to address practical and technical issues of a non-contentious nature. A number of amendments are, however, worthy of mention. The amendments for a reason, the amendment for which a reasonably long battle was fought and for which the wait was unnecessarily long is the amendment to the Criminal Procedure Act concerning the payment of an admission of guilt fine without an appearance in court and the resulting previous criminal conviction. According to the proposed amendment, the Minister may declare that certain categories of offences do not result in a previous conviction against an accused and provides for the expungement of minor offences, as well as certain offences committed in terms of the Disaster Management Act. This is largely to address the excesses perpetrated upon South Africans during the COVID pandemic and the questionable limitations on personal freedoms that were unnecessarily harsh and continued for far too long. The following grounds and criteria must be considered to determine whether or not an offence may be declared as contemplated in the amendment. The offence must be a statutory offence punishable with a fine with or without an alternative sentence of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months. The offence must not contain an element of violence, must not involve the infliction of mental, psychological, or physical harm on another person, must not involve damage to property, must not involve an element of dishonesty, must not involve cruelty to animals, must not be an offence against the administration of justice, or cause pecuniary or economic loss to another person. And the offence must be a high volume offence and pose a low risk of harm or danger to others or the accused. And a criminal record in respect of the offence in question cannot be regarded as an appropriate mechanism to encourage compliance with the law. Amendments are also proposed to the Administration of Estates Act, which was enacted in an era before modern methods of electronic transfer of money. As such, the use of cheques have fallen into disuse, although the Office of the Chief Master has issued a directive authorizing the use of electronic transfer payments. It is proposed that the Administration of Estates Act be amended to make provision for payments by electronic means. Further proposed amendments to the Administrations of Estates Act are to remove references to cheque accounts and cheques or orders, and to allow the executor to open an appropriate account and to make e-payments. Amendments are also envisaged to provide for the powers, duties, and functions of the Chief Master. It is worth noting that the acting Chief Master is still in situ, despite not being appropriately qualified for the post. There are amendments that seek to amend the Domestic Violence Act so as to penalise the making of a false declaration. Clause 30 proposes an amendment to Section 44 of the Superior Courts Act to make provision for the service of documents in civil proceedings before Superior Court, making use of virtual technology or electronic mode as contemplated in the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act. And Clause 35(1) of the bill seeks to repeal the common law relating to the crime of defamation. The repeal of the common law relating to the crime of defamation does not affect civil liability in terms of the common law. Defamation is currently a criminal offence in the Republic and also forms the basis of delictual liability. The United Nations, as well as other foreign authorities, have expressed concerns about the chilling effect of such offences, especially on journalists, and advocate for the abolition of such laws. There are well-established civil remedies based on delict, in addition to the offence of criminal injuria. These are the most striking amendments dealt with in this bill, and the DA will support this legislation. I thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, at the outset, let me just get this thing right. Thank you. At the outset, we would like to caution against this form of lawmaking that groups together a whole range of legislation that individually are aimed at distinct ends. This does not provide for a thorough process of the public participation and does not permit for an intense engagement with the text of the legislation. The Judicial Matters Amendment Bill altogether
seeks to amend about 19 acts, dealing with a whole range of issues affecting the administration of justice, the liquidation and distribution of estates, matrimonial matters, issues relating to the prosecution of crimes, matters relating to that Draconian Disaster Management Act, and the so-called crimes committed under that act. The bill itself was introduced in June, and now we are required to ratify the work of the executive of this House, as this House. The bill emanates from the executive, and Parliament cannot simply be used to rubber stamp legislative wishes of the executive without subjecting bills to a comprehensive public hearing program. That notwithstanding, we support the proposed amendments to the Magistrate Court Act, in as far as it empowers the courts to subpoena witnesses in civil matters who may help the court to make informed decisions. We are also in support of the amendment of the administration. The prosecutions and persecutions that came about as a result of the regulation flowing from the Disaster Management Act during COVID demonstrated the depth into which our judicial system could be used to severely limit the rights of individuals. We are happy with the amendment that will expunge the criminal record of those who were convicted as a result of these COVID-related offenses. May the law never again be used in pursuit of sinister motives, such as it happened during COVID. The amendment of the Interstate Succession Act and the Maintenance of Surviving Spouses Act are specific pieces of legislation that required extensive public participation. These amendments, if passed into law, will change the institution of marriage as we have come to know it. Now, people who were never married will be able to claim benefits from the estates of their partners as if they were married. The word spouse will be interpreted to mean people in life partnership relationships. We opted never to get married. Who opted never to get married? This is a societal matter that ought to reflect the diversity of views in society and not just the view of a selected few. Despite our support for some of the amendments, we are unable to offer our full support to the bill, as we think some of the issues needed to be engaged with more thoroughly. We reject the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The IFP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. This bill, first introduced on 30 March 2023, seeks to address matters of a technical nature that currently require amendment of approximately 37 clauses across 19 current acts of this legislative assembly. The amendment stated to be of a non-contentious manner and says certain constitutional defects in certain acts are to be welcomed, and all except one amendment will not require regulation. The IFP, the amendment in the Domestic Violence Act, which it seeks to penalize the submission of false declarations in the event that a false declaration had been made by the applicant. Clause 10, with its insertion of new sections 57B, 57C, and 57D into the Criminal Procedure Act 1977, as these provisions will assist in clearing the names of those who received criminal records after having paid admission of guilt fines for breaching COVID-19 lockdown regulations. Clause 12, which proposed the repeal of Section 31(3) of the Matrimonial Property Act of 1984, to comply with the Constitutional Court jurisprudence in 2021, which found that section 31(3)(a) to be unfairly discriminatory and not justifiable under section 36 of the Constitution, to the extent that it maintains and perpetuates the discrimination created by section 22(6) of the Black Amendment Act, in that it regarded marriages of Black couples entered into under BAA before 1988 to be automatically out of community of property. Clause 23 inserts section 34A after section 34 of the Prevention of Combating of Corrupt Activities Act of 2004 to provide for the failure of persons or entities in prevent bribery as recommended by the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud. And finally, clause 10, with its insertion of new section 57B, 57C, and 57D into the Criminal Procedure Act of 1977.
Your time is up.
Supports the report. I thank you.
Thank you. FF plus.
No declaration, Chairperson.
Thank you. ACGP.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, South Africa experienced one of the longest and harshest COVID-19 lockdowns globally, with many, in our view, irrational regulations passed in terms of the Disaster Management Act. These had a devastating impact, not only on businesses and the economy, but on people's lives. Tens of thousands of people were arrested for breaking regulations, such as those relating to curfews, consumption of alcohol, or going into public places such as beaches and parks when they were not allowed to do so. By June 2020, there had been 230,000 arrests, and more tragically, 11 deaths after heavy-handed action by authorities. This includes the tragic death of Mr. Collins Khoza, who died after being assaulted by soldiers. What was his crime? Drinking alcohol inside a yard with his friends. By the end of the lockdown, more than 400,000 people were arrested, many trying to make a living and not adhering to the curfews, not having or using sanitizers, or not wearing masks. Many of these people would have paid admission of guilt fines to avoid going to court. This resulted in them having a criminal record, which makes it difficult to obtain employment, to provide for one's family. It was at this time that the ACDP called for the expungement of criminal records for all those who had paid an admission of guilt fine for these trivial offenses under the disaster management regulations and who had thus incurred criminal records. Our recommendation received unanimous support from the Justice Committee, which included the proposal in its 2020 report. And the bill before the House today contains provisions in this regard. Sections 57B, 57C, and 57D amend the Criminal Procedure Act. Now the minister may declare certain categories of offences do not result in previous conviction against the accused, and provides for the expungement of minor offences. This will assist people to clear their names who earn criminal records after having paid admission of guilt fines for breaching COVID-19 lockdown regulations. The ACDP encourages all those who paid an admission of guilt fine to apply for expungement as soon as this bill is signed into law by the President. And may we never again have such irrational regulations which were passed, sadly, without parliamentary intervention or oversight and devastated businesses, employment, and the economy as a whole. The ACDP will support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you. UDM, ATM, good. NFP? NFP? AIC?
No declaration, Chairperson.
Thank you. COPE?
No declaration, Chairperson.
Thank you. PAC? Al-Jama?
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, as you know, we have a very effective parliamentary legislative drafting team. But I can't say the same for the legislative drafting team in the Department of Justice because of the high labor turnover. And press reports indicate that those who serve as dun in die broek, if I'm using the correct Afrikaans term. So we have to watch, we have to look at the legislative recommendations more carefully, but they ran to a cabinet to try and bypass checks and balances. So we are very concerned about the general trend in these amendments. What is missing from the amendments, you know that when the armed struggle was declared by President Mandela and the resistance fighters got a lot of criminal records, those criminal records still exist. In fact, some of them for their political activities are still languishing in our jails. So that is an omission in the amendments. Also, if you look at the department's response to amendments to the maintenance bill and also amendments to the divorce bill, the legislators discriminate against women. And what is very sad is that the state advocate gives them a certificate of constitutional muster. So Al-Jama feels that, there hasn't been, there needs to be more scrutiny, and that's why we won't support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The ANC.
House Chairperson, His Excellency, the Deputy President, members of the House, the key aim of the bill is to amend numerous acts administered by the Department of Justice and Correctional Development and are designed to address practical and technical issues of a non-contentious nature, as well as constitutional judgments. Chairperson, the majority of changes planned include those relating to the internal functioning of the judicial system in a very specific sense, such as the rules regulating payments methods for affidavits, the regulation of calling witnesses, and multiple extensions of definitions. 37 clauses contained in the amendment bill seek to remedy the identified shortcomings and constitutional defects in current acts. The proposed amendment will also boost the smooth administration of justice. Two of the most notable planned amendments include the Criminal Procedure Act and Domestic Violence Act. With the Criminal Procedure Act, the bill provides changes to the Criminal Procedure Act, especially to provisions detailing the admission of guilt and the payment of fines. It further provides for the payment of a fine without an appearance in court and the previous conviction. The bill provides for the removal of a criminal record for a person who is deemed to have been convicted and sentenced in respect of an offense contemplated in any regulations that have been made in terms of Section 27(2) of the Disaster Management Act 2002. If they had paid an admission of guilt fine of appeared in court. Summarily, the bill removes the criminal records of people who paid a fine for breaking COVID-19 lockdown laws, not only COVID-19, but COVID laws, lockdown laws. Laws relating to the pandemic included the wearing of masks, only participating in limited social gatherings, not being on the road at certain times, alcohol and tobacco restrictions. With the Domestic Violence Act, Clause 19 of the Judicial Matters Amendment Bill seek to amend the Domestic Violence Act 1998 so as to penalize the making of a false declaration. A person could make the application just by declaration, not by affidavit, but to prevent false declarations, there must be consequences. The Judicial Matters Amendment Bill also introduces a penalty of false declaring domestic violence. Prior to Judicial Amendment Bill, the Domestic Violence Act was amended through the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill. That bill sought to revise and provide new definitions, including controlling behavior and coercive behavior, and expand the current definition of domestic violence to include spiritual abuse, elder abuse, and exposing children to listed behaviors. Additionally, the updated legislation introduces online applications for protection orders against domestic violence. It imposes duties on officials in health and social development departments to provide support to domestic violence victims. Then Clause 26 amends Section 55 capital A of the Sexual Offences Act to align practical considerations to the legal position. The intention of the legislation is for specific courts or places of sitting to be designated as sexual offences courts, but the current provision allowed for the declaration of regional courts. With the economic climate in the country, there are insufficient funds to expand the special resources to the large numbers of courts where the regional courts sit. The amendment bill seeks to address that too. Proposed amendments to the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act of 2007 include regulating the designation of public health establishments for purposes of providing post-exposure prophylaxis and carrying out compulsory HIV testing, amending the definition of sexual offenses, regulating designation of sexual offenses courts, and regulating the manner in which child pornography must be dealt with and be disposed of. Chairperson, ANC is working very hard, and we are not here to score political points like the EFF. In the interest of smooth administration of justice, the ANC supports the bill. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, I will now put the question. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? No objections. Oh, then the objection of the EFF is noted.
No, the objections of Al-Jama.
Al-Jama, yes. Thank you. So with those objections, the report is thus agreed to. And I will ask the secretary to read the bill a second time.
Judicial Matters Amendment Bill.
Thank you. The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. Thank you. We now move to the fourth order as I ask the secretary to read it.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on Correctional Services Amendment Bill.
Thank you. Again, I will invite the chairperson of the Justice Committee, Honorable Magwanishe, to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, Honorable Deputy President, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members. Section 85, subsection 1 of the Correctional Services Act, 111 of 1998, provides for the establishment of an independent office called the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services under the control of an inspecting judge. The role of the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services is to facilitate the inspection of correctional centers in order that the inspecting judge may report on the treatment of inmates in correctional centers and on conditions in correctional centers. In December 2020, the Constitutional Court confirmed the order of constitutional invalidity made by the Western Cape High Court in Sonke Gender Justice versus the President of the Republic of South Africa and others regarding certain provisions of the Correctional Services Act dealing with the independence of the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. These provisions set out in Section 88, capital A, subsection 1, and Section 91 of the Correctional Services Act deal with the position of the Chief Executive Officer of JICS, as well as the finances of JICS. The court held that these provisions are constitutionally invalid to the extent that they fail to provide adequate levels of independence of the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. The Constitutional Court suspended the declaration of constitutional invalidity for 24 months to afford Parliament an opportunity to enact a remedial legislation. Because of numerous delays, the bill could not be introduced to Parliament within the stipulated 24 months. This is necessitated the Department of Correctional Services to request an extension from the Constitutional Court, which was granted for a further 12 months. The delays experienced with the introduction of this bill and missing the Constitutional Court deadline has highlighted some of the challenges between Parliament and the executive when it comes to introduction of legislation. The committee thinks this is an area that needs to be looked at very seriously. The bill seeks to amend the Correctional Services Act 111 of 1998 to align it with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and the Sonke Judgment to provide for adequate levels of independence to the JICS and matters related thereto. Because this bill only addresses the judgment of the Constitutional Court, there is an urgent need for JICS bill that will ensure that JICS is fully operational and independent from the very same department that it oversees. The JICS bill will also address the role of JICS as part of the National Preventative Mechanism under the optional protocol of the United Nations Convention Against Torture. The committee supports this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I now recognize the Chief Whip of the Majority Party?
Thank you, House Chair. I move that the House adopt this report.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the report being adopted? No objections agreed to. May I ask the Secretary to read the fifth order?
Second reading, Correctional Services Matters Amendment Bill.
Thank you. May I now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration? The DA?
House Chair, this bill is supposed to provide for the adequate level of independence for the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. This was in response of the Constitutional Court Sonke judgment, declaring that sections 88A and 91 of the Principal Act were inconsistent with section 7, paragraph 2 of the Constitution. The court held that these two provisions are constitutionally invalid and the extent that they fail to provide an adequate level of independence to JICS. The Sonke judgment was handed down on 5 September 2019, 4 years ago. The extended deadline set in the judgment was 3 December 2023. This bill under discussion attempts to deal with the immediate constitutional matters. However, the most urgent challenges that JICS are facing are not mentioned. Challenges like no specific reference are made to obligations in terms of the National Preventative Mechanism. There are no alignment to the Public Service Act when it comes to the appointment of a CEO. Recommendations made by JICS are not binding,
and JICS still won't be able to operate as a separate independent body as contemplated in the Sonke judgment. Whilst the DA supports this bill, it should be noted that this bill is a hasty cut and paste job in an attempt to comply with the deadline set by the Sonke judgment. It is an indictment on the legislative responsibility of Parliament. The dragging of feet means that the very important and sorely needed JICS bill will lapse and will have to be reinstated by the 7th Parliament. Citizens probably wonder why Parliament fails to draft and pass relevant legislation 4 years after such a need was identified and required by the Constitutional Court. It is, after all, a core function and responsibility of Parliament. This is what happens when Parliament, in exercising its legislative authority, kowtows to the executive, hastily put together cut and paste legislation. In terms of the Portfolio Committee on Justice, Constitutional Development and Correctional Services, the responsibilities of this committee are too broad. Despite it being the busiest committee in Parliament, the workload doesn't seem to get any less. The Justice section is overburdened as it is, leading to the Correctional Services section that had to process this bill, not receiving the required attention. These are two big departments with enormous budgets. The reason why there are not two separate portfolio committees eludes me. I really hope that the 7th Parliament will at least correct this. The DA will support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the crisis facing correctional centers in this country is such that no cosmetic amendment to the laws will fix. The crisis requires a complete overhaul of the prison system in this country to ensure that those who are incarcerated do get proper opportunities for rehabilitation. At present, it is impossible to ensure that this happens because of the deeply embedded corruption within correctional services. Our correctional centers are abnormally overcrowded, making the administration of these centers a nightmare for managers. So changing the names of heads of prisons to heads of human detention facility, as this bill seeks to do, is merely an inconsequential amendment. The minister is fiddling while prisons are burning. Chair, if we are to legislate, we must have minimum standards for correctional centers, such as capping the number of inmates who may be kept in a cell in jail, or legislating the human rights of inmates, such as their right to food, to bodily integrity, to faster medical care, and not to be subjected to conditions in which they lose any of these fundamental rights. We must legislate for the need to have a regular lifestyle audit for prison officials, who more often take monies from inmates in return for preferential treatment of these inmates. We know that if you have money, you can buy your way to comfort in jail, either by bringing correctional services staff themselves or through buying the protection of gang members in jail. Our correctional centers have become universities of crime in this country, where many come out as hardened criminals. In as far as the amendment relates to the Judicial Inspectorate of Correctional Services, while we support mandatory reporting requirements by heads of prison to the Judicial Inspectorate, these do not take the full account of abuses faced by inmates. The amendment ought to also include making it mandatory to report prisoners to prisoner violations of human rights and create an obligation on correctional centers to stop putting prisoner to prisoner abuse. Overall, we are in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. The IFP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The amendment bill arises from a constitutional court finding that section 88A in brackets 1B and 91 of the Principal Act were inconsistent with section 7 in brackets 2 of the Constitution. The court holding that the impound provisions were constitutionally invalid to the extent that they failed to provide for an adequate level of independence to the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services, that the JICS. The amendment bill seeks to align the Correctional Services Act 111 of 1998 and judgment handed down in Sonke regarding required provisions of adequate independence to the JICS. Quote, when deciding a constitutional matter within its power, a court must declare that any law or conduct that is inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid to the extent of its inconsistency, unquote. Striking down unconstitutional legislation is therefore not the only, but arguably the default option. The matter before us has been postponed beyond 24 months deadline accorded to Parliament by the Constitutional Court to enact remedial legislation, and another 12 months postponement was sought by the Department of Correctional Services and subsequently granted by the court. Public hearings were held and submissions received. The IFP supports the bill, but urges the Ministry of Justice and Correctional Services to introduce the related Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services bill. The bill will deal with the function of the JICS. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. FF plus?
No declaration, Chairperson.
Thank you. ACGP?
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, this judgment was passed by the Constitutional Court on the 4th of December 2020, where the court held that the provisions of the Act, that is the Correctional Services Act, were unconstitutionally invalid because they failed to provide adequate level of independence to the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services, that's JICS. Now, I'm sure we'll all agree that it is crucial for JICS to enjoy independence to enable to do its work efficiently and correctly, and that is oversight over correctional services facilities. The court gave Parliament until the 4th of December 2022 to pass the amending legislation. And because of various delays, as pointed out by the other speakers, this could not be achieved, and an extension was requested from the Constitutional Court until the 4th of December 2023 this year. Only on the 2nd of June of this year was this bill tabled before Parliament and introduced to the committee for consideration. That is 3 years after the judgment. Now, this is an issue which the ACDP and many others in the majority party as well have been raising as a concern in this Parliament. The time delays for the executive to present legislation to Parliament when there is constitutional court judgments and when there are extensions having to be requested by the executive. One must bear in mind that the orders are granted against Parliament, and it is often places Parliament in a very difficult position when it comes to finalizing legislation. This piece of legislation, which we're considering today, has to be considered by this House, has to then go to the NCOP, and then the President needs to consider it before the 4th of December, which does not give, in our view, sufficient time. However, in view of the fact that it does bring a level of independence to JICS, it is very important that we as the committee and all of us support the bill as introduced, but we do urge the ministry to introduce the related Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services Bill, which will deal in greater detail with the independence and the funding of the JICs as is required. So this, in our view, is an interim bill to meet the Constitutional Court deadline, and the ACDP will support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you. UDM, ATM, good, NFP, AIC,
No declaration, Chairperson.
thank you. COPE, COPE, PAC,
No declaration, Chair.
thank you. Al-Jama,
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, this is a first step in the right direction, but for nearly 2 years, the human rights of prisoners have been violated, and that is one of the first steps that makes a country a failed state. It cannot be that the Department of Justice asks for extensions and extensions after Constitutional Court judgments, ignoring the orders of the Speaker that we must pay very important attention to the latitude that the Constitutional Court has given us 2 years to remedy matters. But in the Department of Justice, that seems to fall on deaf ears. I know that the Minister of Justice is not directly responsible for legislation, but I think it's by time that he starts taking an interest on what his deputies are doing. And it cannot be that Parliament be embarrassed. I'm surprised that the Constitutional Court just grants extensions willy-nilly, and they should start putting in place cost orders. There should be consequent management. You cannot violate the human rights of people beyond the 2-year latitude that the Constitutional Court has given. But this is a step in the right direction, and Al-Jama will support this report.
thank you. The ANC,
House Chair, the Excellency Deputy President and colleagues. The regenesis of South Africa's penal system was crafted through the Prisons and Reformatory Act promulgated in 1911, which decreed that prisons of the Union of South Africa shall be strictly resegregated. Secret and use corporal punishment. Abuse grew to appalling heights over decades. Attempts to disclose what was going on in apartheid prisons related to of the media and others. Under the racist authoritarian regime of apartheid, the legal system administered injustice, as the courts were required to implement increasingly oppressive laws. Far from being guardians of fundamental rights, the judiciary came to represent the gateway to unjust imprisonment and punishment without purpose. The majority of the South African population came to regard the machinations of justice with suspicion and mistrust. It is the Correctional Services Act number 111 of 1998, together with the white paper on corrections in South Africa, which facilitated a new paradigm shift, opting for corrections through rehabilitative interventions. The dawn of constitutional democracy necessitated the extensive systematic reform of correctional centers. The Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services, JICS, facilitates the inspection of correctional facilities to ensure that offenders' rights are respected, and the Inspectorate reports on any corrupt or dishonest practices in correctional centers. JICS articulated detailed standards regulating the conditions of detention and the treatment of incarcerated persons and represented a move towards an international acceptance correctional system. Dignity is a fundamental value in our constitution. In the Sonke gender justice case, the court noted that vulnerability of inmates in correctional centers and the real possibility of the infringement of their rights to life, dignity, bodily security, and conditions consonant with human dignity imposes a positive obligation on the state to provide appropriate protection to inmates through laws and structures designed to afford such protection. Sonke instituted proceedings in the High Court and challenged Section 85(2), 91, 88 capital A, 1B, 88 capital A 4, and 91 of the Constitutional Services Act, on the basis that these sections fail to provide the Judicial Inspectorate with the independence it requires to operate effectively. Sonke submitted that Section 7(2) of the Constitution, read with the applicable international law, required the state to create an adequately independent Judicial Inspectorate, not what the EFF is talking about, trying to address currently, what we are trying to address currently, the conditions and corruption within our centers and the department. That is not the topic. The topic is that the High Court upheld Sonke challenge to Section 88 capital A, B, Section 88, 88 capital A4 and 91, and found that these sections threatened the Judicial Inspectorate independence, which was vital to the Judicial Inspectorate delivery for its mandate, and that the creation of inspectorate without the necessary independence to discharge its mandate would not constitute a reasonable step as required under Section 7(2) of the Constitution. In the Constitutional Court, Sonke contended that the High Court order should be confirmed in respect of all three of the impaired sections. It submitted that they undermine the independence of the Judicial Inspectorate, rendering it subject to the control of the Department of Correctional Services, which it is designed to oversee. The first judgment, which is the majority judgment, upheld the order of constitutional invalidity in respect of Section 88 capital A, A1, B, and 91. It held that Section 7(2) of the Constitution required the state to take reasonable steps to protect the rights of incarcerated persons, and that the state had elected to do so by establishing the Judicial Inspectorate. The first judgment concluded that independence was an inherent characteristic of an oversight entity, and that the Judicial Inspectorate should be structurally and operationally independent and perceived as such in order to execute its mandate. This requirement flowed directly from the state's constitutional obligation to act reasonably and effectively in protecting the rights of incarcerated persons. The first judgment affirmed that this finding was supported by international law. The first judgment held that sections 88 capital AA, 1, B, and 91 did not ensure sufficient structural and operational independence to the Judicial Inspectorate, nor did they bolster the public perception of its independence. This bill, therefore, seeks to amend the Principal Act to align it with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and the Sonke judgment to provide for an adequate level of independence to the jigs and matters related thereto. We are of the view that this bill will strengthen the relationship between jigs and the Department of Correctional Services. The ANC supports the bill. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will now put the question. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? No objections. Report agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Correctional Services Amendment Bill.
Thank you. The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the sixth order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Administration on Public Administration Laws, General Amendment Bill.
The Honorable Mkweba.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable Deputy President, Honorable Ministers, Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, good afternoon. Lawmaking is a constitutional mandate and key function of Parliament. The process of lawmaking requires consultation. Today, we tabled before the August House the report of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Administration on the private members' bill named the Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill. The bill was introduced in the National Assembly, proposed as Section 76, and was published in the Government Gazette. The bill was sponsored by Honorable Member Dr. Leon Schreiber, one of the committee members. Among the objects of the bill are to prohibit political office bearers from employment in the public service, to prohibit special service benefits for Director Generals and the heads of departments who get dismissed from the public service, to enhance the financial independence of the Public Service Commission, and to mandate the Public Service Commission to enforce merit-based appointments free from political interference. House Chair, as part of the tradition of processing the legislation, the committee received inputs from 4 organizations, both written and oral submissions on the bill. The Socio-Economic Impact Assessment Unit in the Presidency was invited to provide the inputs on the bill. Based on the outcomes of the public participation, it found that the bill coheres with some of the work already initiated by our government and parallels other important legislative amendment bills, such as the Public Service Amendment Bill, the Public Administration Management Amendment Bill, and the Public Service Commission Amendment Bill. House Chair, currently the committee is processing the Public Service Amendment Bill and Public Administration Management Bill, which address similar aspects the Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill seeks to achieve. The Public Service Amendment Bill focuses on strengthening the recruitment process, which embraces the meritocratic appointments in the public service. House Chair, financial administration, governance, and independence of the Public Service Commission remain a paramount priority of the committee. The Public Service Commission is currently finalizing the bill to be tabled before Parliament, which seeks to repeal the Public Service Commission Act of 1997 to enable the Commission to operate as independent, with its staff recruited under the new Act, which with its own secretariat appointed by the commissioners. Honorable members, all legislative and policy reforms in the public service are consistent and complement the Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill. Based on the existing legislative amendments in the public service, the committee resolved to recommend to this August House that the Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill is undesirable as it coheres and complements the existing bills drafted by the Department of Public Service and Administration. The Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill mirrored the above mentioned bills before the committee, and the sponsor of the bill, Honorable Schreiber, tabled the bill in the National Assembly whilst the department was still consulting with relevant
stakeholders. The bill is undesirable and the ANC rejects this bill. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration. The usual times will apply. The DA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Over the past term, this Parliament has repeatedly been presented with evidence of the devastating consequences of cadre deployment. The Zondo Commission found that cadre deployment laid the foundation for state capture. The National Framework for the Professionalization of the Public Sector recommended, and I quote, that deployment practices ought to be ditched in favor of merit-based recruitment and selection systems. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court of Appeal confirmed that it is illegal for the ANC to keep cadre deployment records secret from the people of South Africa because it impacts on service delivery. And I see the Deputy President, as current chair of the Deployment Committee, is present here today. If all of this was still not enough to convince you that it is time to abolish cadre deployment, I invite you to simply go out onto the streets and have a 5-minute conversation with ordinary citizens. You will quickly realize that the people of this country know why Eskom no longer provides them with electricity. They know why they cannot take the train to work, why police don't catch criminals, and why there is no longer water coming out of the taps. The people of South Africa understand why the social grants they need to survive are no longer being paid. Yes, the people of South Africa indeed know that the suffering they endure at the hands of a corrupt and an incompetent state is due to one thing above all else, the virus of cadre deployment. This virus has infected every part of our lives. It has rewritten the very DNA of our society. Instead of a society that embraces skills and celebrates excellence, cadre deployment has given power over us to the very worst among us. Chair, the DA today proudly presents the cure for cadre deployment to this House. The End Cadre Deployment Bill will make it a criminal offense to interfere in public appointment processes. It will prohibit politicians from working in the civil service. It will make the Public Service Commission independent and mandate it to enforce merit-based appointments. And yet, the report proposed by the ANC majority on the Committee on Public Service and Administration regards this bill as, quote, undesirable. That's right. The ANC in this committee openly admits that it does not desire a cure for the cadre deployment virus that is killing South Africa. Honorable Chair, we should all be clear on one thing. Today's vote is nothing less than a referendum that will show where political parties stand on the issue of systemic corruption. The DA will call for a division and vote against this report and its nonsensical view that a cure for cadre deployment is undesirable. A vote against this report today is a vote against cadre deployment. Conversely, any party that votes in favor of this report will be voting in favor of cadre deployment and corruption. Any party that votes for this report will be violating the State Capture Commission's crystal clear finding that cadre deployment is unlawful. Chair, this is a moment of truth. Chair, this is a moment of truth, especially for the ANC and for President Cyril Ramaphosa. After all the promises and all the lip service, a vote for cadre deployment today will expose the true face of the party led by President Ramaphosa. A vote for this report will confirm that state capture and corruption is nothing less than the official policy of the African National Congress. It is time to stand up and be counted in this House today. I call on the ANC to fix the mistake made by its members in committee by rejecting this report. If more than half of members in this House vote against the report, we will begin to rescue South Africa from cadre deployment. Just last week, Chair, we saw how different parties put aside narrow politics in order to do the right thing by removing the public protector. Let us do so again today by embracing the cure for cadre deployment. But let us also be warned. Any party that fails to rise to the occasion today can rest assured that voters will harshly punish them next year for having the audacity to openly vote for cadre deployment, for corruption, and for state capture. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The EFF.
House Chairperson, on behalf of the economic freedom fighters, we find the behavior of the committee and the National Assembly to be nonsensical. Last week, this House approved 2 committee reports rejecting private members' bills introduced by members of Parliament. The reasons advanced by the Finance Standing Committee were nonsensical, and we made this clear. Yet today, we are informed that the Portfolio Committee on Public Services and Administration considers the Public Administration Law General Amendment Bill, another private member's bill, undesirable, which the ANC used its majority to come to that decision. Even in this instance, no acceptable reasons have been provided for rejecting this bill, except that it was a private member's bill. The message you are sending to the public is that this parliament does not process private members' bills. We are in fact declaring that as parliament, our primary job is to wait for the executive to introduce legislation, and we will follow their lead, even on matters that the very same executive poses a problem. It is the very same executive that has crippled the Public Service Commission, rendering it ineffective, and is now riddled with corruption and nepotism by senior officials. Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa promised to conduct a live audit in 2018. To this day, there is no shred of evidence of any of this occurring. We are left with no choice but to conclude that this is a lie. The man spoke of reforms on paper throughout his entire term in office. With only a few months left, he continues to promise reforms. We may not agree with the assertion that every political appointment is inherently corrupt and will lead to political interference. Just because the ANC has poorly managed the state since 1996 does not automatically mean that political appointments lack merit. We are attempting to address the ANC corruption with legislation rather than effective oversight in the absence of an independent NPA. For now, Chairperson, the solution is to remove the ANC from power in 2024 so that they can no longer use their majority to misrepresent this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The IFP.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson. I'm reading this declaration on behalf of the Honorable Nkosi Arenkebe Khulu. Our Constitution has been praised as one of, if not the best in the world. Although this is so, our legislation is only as effective and functional as those who enforce them. It is therefore no wonder that one cannot overemphasize the importance of a public service that is professional, effective, functional, and above all, responsive to the needs of our people. Despite our differences in values, priorities, and affiliations in this House, the IFP is confident that we can all agree that beyond these walls, our public service force is in disarray, as more often than not, public resources are intentionally, one might argue, not being used efficiently, effectively, nor economically. Amongst others, we recognize the importance of this bill in empowering the Public Service Commission to take remedial action where deemed applicable and necessary. Most importantly, in prohibiting special service benefits for directors general and HODs who get dismissed from public service due to electoral reasons. Not only is the current modus operandi of seemingly rewarding DGs or HODs who have been dismissed for either corruption or practice or sheer incompetence absurd at its best, but it also puts needlessly enormous strain on the fiscus of the country. Therefore, it is of grave concern to the IFP that it has taken this long for a similar stance to be taken and implemented on this matter. Chairperson, one can only wonder why this was never the priority of government in all these years. The bill's proposals to mandate the PSC to enforce merit-based appointments, which are divorced from political interference, stands essential to the sustainability of the functionality of our public service. One might stress with confidence that because although you will know the supreme law of the land is the Constitution mandating that no employee of the public service may be favored or prejudiced only because that person supports a particular political party or cause, it has become quite the norm and even almost unquestionable for employment in public service to be directly linked to and influenced by a person's political affiliation. The successful adoption and enforcement, therefore, of this bill leads the country towards much needed depoliticization of public service, while simultaneously building a capable, ethical, and professional public administration that is not only free from any political interference, but one that is beneficial to all. Honorable House Chairperson, it is our sincere plea that this matter be afforded the attention and urgency it deserves. This, we believe, will ensure that money is wasted unnecessarily on both corruption and incompetent public office bearers can instead be rightly directed towards service delivery that our people have been desperately waiting for 3 decades. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable House Chair, the Zondo Commission found that practices of political appointments and removals were key to state capture. This has also been confirmed in our courts through the likes of Mlokoti versus the Amatole District Municipality. Furthermore, according to the Institute for Race Relations, public service placement has become so politicized that incumbents spend most of their time garnering political favor and looking for their next position, thus not serving the citizens of this country. During the public participation process on this bill, UNISA's Institute for Global Dialogue also argued that there is a growing consensus over party lines about the need for a professional public service. Dit is dus gemeensaak, agbare voorsitter, dat die stand van Suid-Afrika se staatsdiens nie professioneel, bekwaam of eties is nie. Waarom nie? Want in plaas daarvan om meriete-gebaseerde aanstellings te maak en behoorlike personeelbestuursbeginsels toe te pas, is die roete van kaderontplooiing, nepotisme en bedrog en korrupsie eerder gevolg. Waarom anders sal hierdie regering by monde van die Departement van Staatsdiens en Administrasie met elke moontlike geleentheid wat hulle kry, spog met die sogenaamde staatsdiensprofessionaliseringsraamwerk? Waarom is so 'n raamwerk in die eerste plek nou nodig? According to the report, government, through the DPSA, is currently working on a plethora of policies, which includes the professionalization framework, to enforce merit-based appointments free from political interference. This is nothing else than an admission of guilt by the ANC majority on the Portfolio Committee on behalf of the ANC government that this so-called plethora of policies is necessary to address and undo the damage that political interference and cadre deployment has done to the public service and to South Africa under the ANC government for the past 30 years. Maar, soos met alle mooi broodjies wat deur die ANC gebak word, is hierdie sogenaamde oorvloed van oorvleelende beleidsraamwerke ook net lippediens. Want nie teenstaande die oorvloed van verskonings wat voorgehou word as redes vir die sogenaamde ongewenstheid van hierdie wetsontwerp, is hierdie wetsontwerp die enigste tasbare teenvoeter vir kaderontplooiing wat al ter tafel gelê is en wat gedurende hierdie parlementêre termyn deurgevoer kan word. En daarom weier die ANC-lede van hierdie komitee en hierdie vergadering om hierdie wetsontwerp te aanvaar, want dan word die bekamping van kaderontplooiing 'n werklikheid. Eenvoudig gestel, agbare voorsitter, dit sal die belange van die mense van Suid-Afrika bo die belange van die ANC stel, en dit is wat vir die ANC onaanvaarbaar is. Ek dankie.
Thank you, honorable member. ACDP.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the ACDP has taken note of this report, which rejects yet another eminently reasonable private members' bill. And we'd like to remind the House what the Constitutional Court had to say about the importance of private members' bills. And this is important for this bill and the next item, which is the ACDP's private members' bill. The court said, ours is a constitutional democracy that is designed to ensure that the voices are heard, even those who would, given a choice, have preferred not to entertain the views of the marginalized or the powerless minorities. The power of an individual member of the Assembly to introduce a bill, particularly those from the ranks of the opposition, is more than ceremonial in its significance. It gives them, that's us, the opposition, the opportunity to go beyond merely opposing, but to propose constructively in a national forum another way of doing things. It serves as an avenue for articulating positions through public debate and consideration of alternative proposals on how a particular issue can be addressed or regulated differently and arguably better. This is key. The main aim of this bill is to depoliticize the public service and build a capable, ethical, and professional public administration, free from any political interference. A merit-based public service helps to bring high-quality staff. It confers prestige in the civil service positions, and this can ameliorate individual performance to provide quality citizens to all citizens. Meritocracy provides talented and hardworking people from all walks of life with a means of advancement and the opportunity to contribute to the well-being of the larger society. Now, this is obvious to all of us that this is necessary, but beyond that, the Zondo State Commission has found that the ANC's cadre deployment is unconstitutional and illegal. The Commission said, quote, the Constitution envisages a public administration that maintains a high standard of professional ethics that is efficient, economic, effective in its use of resources, that is impartial, fair, equitable, and without bias. More tellingly, Judge Zondo confirmed a link between the Cadre Deployment Committee and state capture in his report. Read the report. This bill, in a nutshell, will prevent cadre deployment, which has racked government departments and SOEs. It is surely to be supported, given the poor state of many of our departments and municipalities, and incompetence and corruption, largely due to cadre deployment. However, it is no wonder that the ANC has opposed this bill, given the vested interest in maintaining cadre deployment. The ACDP will not support this report, which rejects these imminent proposals in line with the Zondo report recommendations. How can it be declared undesirable? I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. UDM. ATM. Good. NFP. AIC.
Thank you, Chairperson. The National Development Plan envisages a professional and capable public service. This is consistent with the Constitution, which requires public administration to be efficient and effective. In this regard, all organs of state, inclusive of state departments across all spheres of government, must comply with the public service precept. In order to give full effect to public service precepts, the Public Service Commission must enjoy adequate independence. The purpose of the Public Service Commission Amendment Bill is geared towards achieving this independence. It also repeals the Public Service Commission Act of 1997 with the sole aim to confer the Commission sufficient independence and transform it as an impartial constitutional body with its own secretariat. We also support the bill's intention to prohibit political office bearers from employment in the public service, including its commitment to enhance the administrative independence of the Commission. The provisions of the bill dealing with bolstering the Commission's remedial powers as binding is to be commended. In relation to budget allocations to the Commission, we support the ongoing trend which the bill formalizes into law, wherein the National Treasury, as opposed to the Department of Public Service and Administration, is responsible for the Commission's budget. This will guarantee its independence and shield it from executive interference. The insertion of Section 8A to the Public Service Commission Act by this bill must also be celebrated. For the first time in the history of public service, any decision regarding the recruitment, transfer, and promotion of public service employees will be based on ability demonstrated by proficiency, including qualifications and skills. The prohibition of any recruitment, transfer, promotion, or dismissal based on a person's support or opposition to a particular political party or cause is also worth noting. The current trend has been to employ people on the basis of their political party's affiliation, which has tended to compromise efficient service delivery. It is indeed time to reinvent the wheel and cast public service anew. We support the bill, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Member Cope. PAC.
Honorable Chair, PAC supports the bill.
Thank you. Al-Jama.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, Al-Jama supports the voorlegging of the Freedom Front Plus that South Africa needs a professional public service. And as we heard, that was the recommendation of the Zondo Commission, and that is also the position of President Cyril Ramaphosa. I don't know what is the position of the Leader of Parliament with regard to a professional public service. So Al-Jama would like to thank Honorable Schreiber for throwing a lifeline to South Africa by coming up with a private member's bill that addresses these shortcomings in our democracy. Honorable House Chair, I think that there should be a ruling condemning the position of the Portfolio Committee that Honorable Schreiber's bill is undesirable. There's nothing more desirable than that bill. And it is a disgrace that Parliament be told that it is undesirable. Al-Jama would like to propose that some of the great clauses and groundbreaking clauses in Honorable Schreiber's bill should be cut and pasted in the so-called bills that the Portfolio Committee said is already before Parliament. They are not before Parliament. That bill has trumped them. It is a sign of proactiveness, and it shows that the members of the Portfolio Committee, they need to not leave such a legacy behind. They will be remembered for their default in this matter. So thank you very much, Honorable Schreiber, for throwing a lifeline to South Africa.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The ANC.
Honorable Chairperson of the session, to the Honorable Deputy President, Ministers, the Honorable Members, Liba Ahi ba Afrika Borwa, Dumelang. Wabona huba ahi ki batla o le hopotsa tsatsing lena. Hore le ske la mamela le ho lahleiswa. Ke batho ba tlatla emang mona. Ba tshela metsi nthong yohle e ntle e etswang ke mokgatlo ona wa ANC ho fetola maphelo a lona. E ne le maoba mona ha banka bana ba DA ba nka Western Cape. Bontate Mgoqi bana ba etsa mosebetsi o motle ebile ba qualifya for mesebetsi ena. Ba ile ba bantsha ine e le cicada deployment eo ba neng ba etsa. Khale mane ka government ya Nationalist Party ono kabelwa e leng motho e leng head wena o na le matric kapa o na le qualification e hodimo e be le boss ya hao. Ha re ske ra lahleiswa mona ba ema ka baka la ho ba batla di vote tsa lona le sike la dumela ke ANC fela e ka phetholang maphelo a lona. Honorable Chair, the ANC in the sixth administration has prioritized building a capable and ethical developmental state as the number one priority. This is so because various developmental studies and experiences of nations which grew their economy and address poverty and unemployment use the capability and capacity of the state to drive economic development and meet their national development objectives. The Department of Public Service and Administration is currently in the process of the implementation of the professionalization framework. The professionalization framework is critical in ensuring the public service has sufficient systems for developing mobility and retaining critical skills within the public sector. The Democratic Alliance has sponsored a private members bill whose intention is to address various aspects which the department has already finalized an amendment bill on. As the ANC, we do not support the amendment bill as proposed by the DA. Firstly, it sought to be preemptive on proposals and amendments the department has to table. And various public admissions have highlighted this weakness in the approach of the DA. Secondly, we do not support the policy orientation of the DA on its proposed amendments, such as the parameters of the limitations of political office bearers from employment in the public service, which takes a blanket approach than focus on key senior public service roles. The amendment as proposed by the DA will border on the right of individuals. Thirdly, on the prohibition of special service benefits for the directors general and heads of departments who get dismissed. A general prohibition does not take into consideration the different factors which can necessitate a negotiated benefit. The point is that context matters. Fourthly, the proposed amendment related to the Public Service Commission also relates to matters which the Commission is already undertaking a view of legislation to develop a Public Service Commission bill, which will address some of the matters identified in the private members bill, though we differ with the DA on its interpretation of how a merit-based system should be factored in and in other areas. The members bill from states matters which the Constitution and various legislation already prescribed. Lastly, our observation is that the politicalization of required interventions, such as the distortions on cadre development, have resulted in the DA's members bill having a narrow interpretation of cadre development, which they apply its essence with the government. As the African National Congress, our cadre deployment policy is a critical instrument to ensure that the organization applies itself to the type of public servants and representatives that the ANC will support where such parameters to exist. A critical consideration that society is not informed of is the fact that in all states which political parties are elected as governing parties, significant changes within the administration are done and appointment of senior officials beyond the requirement of the job. Executive authorities assesses the orientation of the said candidate, and they assess whether such candidates understand the plan of the government, the governing party, and the objective of that administration term. We should not vulgarize cadre deployment as if it is all illegal practice, but it is an instrument of a governing party to yield its power within the parameters of the law. Having considered the members' bill by Honorable Schreiber, we have taken a decision not to support the bill as it does not meet our desirability standards, and it duplicates some amendments tabled by the department We are already at an advanced stage in the Portfolio Committee on the consideration of the Public Service Amendment Bill and the Public Administration Management Bill. We have received written submissions, which thus far indicates overwhelming support for the various clauses. What the DA's members' bill falls short of is the devolution of powers from the executive authority to the administrative authority and various sections to enhance. This will enhance accountability and reduce instances of the abuse of the executive authority through empowering the administrative authority, which is a critical. Public sectors organizations support the amendment bill by the department. This demonstrates the commitment of the ANC to ensuring that we build a capable and ethical developmental state, which will ensure that we transform the socio-economic conditions of our people and deliver timelessly services. We support on the understanding of the DA. We support this report on the understanding of the DA's private members bill. I think this is time that you should.
Thank you very
accept
much,
that
Honorable
we are
Member.
in government.
I now recognize the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Nkosi Sihlalo. Chair, we move for the adoption of this report. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted.
Well, really, I'm saying so.
Honorable Chief.
House Chair, we call for division, please.
Thank you. A division having been called, the bells will be rung for 5 minutes.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Honorable members, the Speaker has determined that in accordance with the rules, a manual voting procedure will be used for this division. Firstly, in order to establish a quorum, I'll request the table to confirm that we have the requisite number of members physically present in the chamber and on the visual platform to take this decision. Party whips will then be given an opportunity to confirm the number of their members present and indicate if they vote for or against the question. A member who wishes to abstain or vote against the party vote may do so by informing the chair. Having confirmed that we have the requisite quorum, we will now proceed. The question before the House is that the bill be agreed to. Voting will now commence. The doors to the chamber will be locked, and members will not be allowed to enter the virtual platform until voting is concluded. Whips, could you confirm the number of your members present in the chamber?
House Chair, it's, we are deciding on the report and not the bill. I think you made an
Okay,
error.
thank you very much. Thanks for that correction. Whips, would you confirm the number of your members present in the chamber and on the virtual platform and indicate if they vote for or against the question? Table will assist if needs be. Zola. Are the party whips ready to record the votes of their members who are present? ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, ANC, in, in physical attendance, we are 40. On the virtual platform, we are 158, totaling up to 201 voting in full support. Tuba.
Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable Chief Whip of the majority party. May I give you the opportunity again to reread your numbers? The total.
House Chair, on virtual platform is 161. 161. Mamelani kakuhle. 161. Here it's 40. Total 201.
Thank you very much. The GA.
House Chair. Colleagues, House Chair, in the House, we are 16. Online, we are 58. A total of 74 members voting against this report.
Thank you very much. EFF.
The EFF is 23 on virtual platform and 3 physical, totaling 26 voting against.
Thank you. IFP.
Q House Chairperson, 3 in the House, 8 online, a total of 11 voting against this report.
Thank you. FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chairperson. We are 5 in the House, 3 online. That's 8 members voting against this.
Thank you. ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. The ACDP is 2 online, 1 in the House voting, 3 voting against. Thank you.
UDM. ATM. Board. NFP. AIC.
1 on virtual, Honorable Chairperson, voting against the report.
Yeah. COPE. PAC.
PAC 1 in the virtual platform and voting in favor.
Yeah. Al-Jama. Al-Jama. Thank you. Is there any member that wishes to abstain or vote differently to their party? Thank you. The voting session is now closed. There seems to be a delay. I think the results are unusual. Thank you very much, honorable members. There are no abstentions. The noes, 123. And the yes is 202. Thank you very much. Shall we proceed? Thank you very much. Well, the report is agreed to. Shall we proceed? The secretary will read the 7th order.
Second reading, Public Administration Laws General Amendment Bill.
Thank you. As there is no list of speakers, I will now put the question. Are there any objections to the bill not being read a second time as recommended by the committee? Honorable member.
House Chair, please note the objections of the DA.
It is noted.
Please note the objection of the FF Plus.
Noted.
Please note the objection of the ACDP. Thank you.
Oh, noted, honorable member.
Please note the objection of the EFF.
Noted. With those objections, the report is agreed to. The bill is therefore not read a second time. The secretary will read the 8th order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development on Animals Protection Amendment Bill.
Thank you very much. The Honorable ZMD Mandela.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Molweni, Dumelang, goeiemiddag, good afternoon, honorable members. I am reminded of the late Comrade Dala Oma, may his soul rest in peace, who was fond of saying, I quote, "We should not introduce legislation for what we already have powers to do," close quote. I want to add to that a bit of wisdom that we should not introduce amendments that have little relevance, may in fact have negative consequences or impact our already limited resources. The sarcastic amongst us may even venture to say, don't keep this house busy when you don't have better things to do. Chairperson, having said that, I want to thank and acknowledge Honorable Swartz for giving expression to an important right in this August House, namely the right of introducing private members' bills, or more correctly, individual members' legislative proposals. This too is an expression of democracy at work and reflects the health and functioning of our constitutional democracy. Honorable members, where the need arises, and when such private members' bills in fact do contribute positively and constructively, it is highly welcomed and worthy of support by all in this House. Our primary task as public representatives is to ensure that we apply best endeavors to be the voices of the people, prioritizing what affects them, addressing their needs, and being the custodians of their constitutional rights, especially as enshrined in the Bill of Rights. With respect to the proposed Animal Protection Amendment Bill, and in rejecting the motion of desirability, it was highlighted that there is no need for the bill since the member who sponsored the bill and some of the submissions in support of the bill, including the departments that gave inputs, highlighted that there is no testing of cosmetics on the animals that is taking place in the Republic of South Africa. Committee members were of the view that the bill narrowly focused on testing on cosmetics on animals within the borders of the Republic of South Africa, without taking into consideration the impact of imported cosmetics or ingredients that are used in cosmetics, as it was reported that 90% of ingredients used in the manufacturing of cosmetics in the country are imported. It was mentioned that in a resource-constrained country such as ours, the objects of the bill may not provide the significant benefit to the country, but a negative impact on employment in the local cosmetics industry and its development, as well as international trade. Further, in light of the numerous issues, including advances in animal welfare that have been highlighted through some of the submissions on the bill, and the need for a holistic approach to animal welfare instead of piecemeal amendments to an outdated piece of legislation was emphasized, including the development of comprehensive animal welfare bill that will address all aspects of animal welfare. The minister can develop regulations under Section 10 of the Animal Protection Act, Act number 71 of 1962, to address the testing of cosmetics on animals while comprehensive legislation is being developed. We have come a long way since the labeling of fellow humans as animals, even though the rights of animals were not even accorded to some of us. Madiba reminded us when he said, I quote, although Verwoerd thought Africans were lower than animals, his death did not yield us any pleasure. Political assassinations is not something I or the ANC ever supported. It is a primitive way of contending with an opponent, close quote. We are opposed to primitive ways of dealing with friends or foe, be they be human or animal. On the contrary, we have over the past 6 sessions of Parliament laid down a right-based paradigm to protect the most vulnerable and all who live in the country. Perhaps it is fitting to draw attention to all the world-class and progressive legislation tabled in this August House, especially on environmental protection, to preserve the good that we have inherited from posterity. We look forward, honorable members, to work comprehensively with all in this House, developing a comprehensive animal welfare bill to achieve the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration. The usual times will apply. The DA.
Thank you, House Chair. The Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development has closely examined the Animal Protection Amendment Bill. This private member's bill referred to the committee on the 27th of January, 2021, originated from Honorable Swart's preemptive intent to redefine cosmetic within the bill and to introduce a new offense pertaining to the testing of cosmetics or their ingredients on animals. From the outset, the Democratic Alliance had no reservations about the bill's intent. However, the inadequacies in the presentations by the various departments revealed a lack of commitment from the ANC government. Subsequently, ANC members of the Portfolio Committee, including Minister Togo Didiza, echoed this sentiment. Despite inputs from the Department of Health and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, it was clear that the Democratic Alliance's concerns were not adequately addressed, maybe purposefully so. We were assured of written answers to our questions, but this commitment has yet to be fulfilled. Ms. Saina Musehla, Director of Cosmetics at the DTIC, noted that a cosmetic regulation developed by the DOH hadn't been enforced since 2017 because of staffing shortages. She questioned the department's capacity to implement the new bill, given these ongoing challenges and the introduction of new legislation in the cosmetic sector. While the DA acknowledges the pressing issue of animal cosmetic testing, we also consider our standing in the global trade community. Before passing the desirability of this bill, it's vital to address all concerns related to international trade. Specifically, we sought clarity on our engagements with countries that have already banned animal cosmetic testing. We have expressed the imminent need to address potential trade imbalances. Moreover, the proposed amendment doesn't stipulate that countries supplying cosmetics tested on animals should comply with South African law once they are enacted, which could become crucial in the socio-economic impact. Like the Democratic Alliance, both the Department of Health and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition recognize the grave consequences of animal cosmetic testing. The crux of the matter is the potential technical barriers this presents in global trade. While there's worldwide agreement that animal welfare is important, we need to figure out how quickly we can address this issue using legal examples from other countries, but without harming our position in global trade. Moreover, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition's presentation failed to mitigate the committee's apprehensions regarding potential imbalances resulting from the bill. House Chairperson, despite assurances from the DTIC, the committee has yet to receive the promised written responses. These responses were expected to provide examples of case law from other countries, a list of countries that utilize animal testing for cosmetics and currently export their products to South Africa, and an in-depth report on potential technical trade barrier issues. These concerns lead us back to the broader scope of the Animal Welfare Bill. Shouldn't the committee prioritize animal welfare as a foundational principle to address these challenges? However, despite the pressing need for amendments or repeal of Animal Protection Bill, the Animal Welfare Bill has languished for a decade. While the DA recognizes the urgency of finalizing this pivotal bill, the current fragmented approach, coupled with unanswered critical questions, forced us to abstain from voting on the bill's desirability, especially given the absence of the promised written responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The EFF.
Honorable Chair, thank you so much. Honorable Chair, this bill was introduced by Honorable Swartz, a man whose passion for animal welfare and animal protection can only be paralleled by the biblical Noah, the man who created an ark and administered animals 2 by 2, and those that came in crowds, he says, no, you've got no space. Guys, please get only 2 amongst yourselves. This bill was introduced in order to prohibit the use and testing of animals for cosmetic purposes. The committee decided that the bill is not desirable at the moment because it narrowly focuses on resolving a problem that does not exist, according to the ANC, and that more suitable proposition is that of an alternative bill in the form of an animal welfare bill that shall look at the protection of animals more comprehensively. We are not in opposition to this proposition. However, we want to caution that in these committees that we have had these discussions, the majority party has always sought to stifle members from introducing bills such as this one. For this reason, the majority of the bills that are passed by the House are bills introduced by the executive and not by committees or members themselves. And we take courage from Honorable Smart by being brave and brought this bill before the committee. We also want to encourage members not to be confined by narrow religious beliefs when introducing bills. The solutions we provide must be comprehensive and benefit society and go beyond the narrow defines of religious belief. Nonetheless, the need exists that animals must be protected in a form of animal welfare bill. For this reason, Honorable Chair, we as the EFF support the report. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. IFP.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson, again on behalf of the Honorable Nkosi Aren Kebekul. At the outset, One would like to start off by stating that the IFP appreciates the Animal Protection Amendment Bill's progressive and proactive intent, considering that we often see the government take a more reactive approach to legislative amendments. However, as we have stated during the committee meeting, in the way the amendment bill is currently drafted, its intent might be on the prevention of testing cosmetics on animals, but it will extend to the medical field, where animals are used for the testing of medicine that have the ability to heal and extend the lives of human beings. One would not want to enter into the debate about whose life is more important. However, solely want to focus the attention on the impact of this bill in its current form. One is reminded of the period during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, when every country across the world was awaiting the release of vaccines. During this time, it was the vaccine trials performed on animals by the world's major pharmaceutical companies that gave us the much needed assurance that vaccines are safe for human consumption. Therefore, animals play a vital role in the field of medicine. Therefore, we need to ensure that the role and the function of the Animal Ethics Committee conforms to the South African national standard for the care and use of animals for scientific purposes, which was developed and published in 2008 by the South African Bureau of Standards. This standard aims to ensure the ethical and humane care of animals used for scientific purposes and encompasses all aspects of care. The IFP wants to echo the sentiment of the report that there is a need for a holistic approach to animal welfare instead of fragmented amendments to an outdated piece of legislation. Therefore, the IFP supports this report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, I am disappointed that the Portfolio Committee rejected the private member's amendment bill on animal protection to ban cosmetic testing on animals. Even though cosmetic testing is not done on animals in South Africa, institutionalizing the principle would have been a step in the right direction for the formal preventative protection of animals. It would have also brought South Africa in line with international norms and standards like those of the European Union, the United Kingdom, certain American states, India, Taiwan, China, and more. At present, South Africa has an E score on the International Animal Protection Index. This scale scores countries from A, which is the best, to G, the worst. A preventative piece of legislation like this would have had no financial impact on any organizations, and it would only have offered benefits. South Africa currently ranks number 26 on the international list of animal rights, and adopting this amendment bill would surely have improved this ranking. It would also not have had financial implications on the government, seeing as there are already existing structures and organizations in place that look after the well-being of animals. Even though the amendment only has benefits, it was met with strong opposition from the department and the committee, and general agricultural matters like vaccines against diseases and even the exportation of milk were held up as excuses. There were attempts to narrow the definition of cosmetics, and it was even argued that it could jeopardize job opportunities in the future. It is simply not true. Parliament received a total of 2,383 public submissions on the amendment bill, including from organizations like Beauty Without Cruelty, animal welfare organizations, and other interested parties. Of the submissions, 1,311 supported the bill, while 1,052 pleaded for even greater protection of animals, and a mere 7 objections were received, and those related to technical aspects of the bill. Motivated by regulatory changes across the world, research on technology to replace animal testing in the cosmetic industry with alternative non-animal testing methods is becoming the accepted norm. Clearly, though, the ANC has cultivated an environment in South Africa where neither human nor animal rights mean very much, and this serves as proof. By adopting this amendment bill, the committee could have set an example for Parliament and the country of a government that prizes good values and norms, but sadly, it opted not to do so. A society's value system can easily be measured by the actions it takes to protect those who do not have a voice of their own. This includes people in need, animals, and the environment. The government has demonstrated time and again that this is absolutely not what they are doing. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The ACDP.
House Chair, today is a very sad day in Parliament for us. We've missed the opportunity of passing the desirability of a very harmless bill to protect vulnerable animals from great cruelty. Now, the ACDP's Animals Protection Amendment Bill is a very narrow bill. It proactively seeks to ban the practice of cosmetic testing on animals, which is cruel and unnecessary, and this would be in line with global trends. It is preemptive, as there is no cosmetic testing on animals in South Africa. It specifically excludes medical research testing. Hence, there'd be no impact on jobs or imports of cosmetic products. Even those tested on animals in other countries, it does not affect them. But when one looks at global trends, you see that there is a formulation of products. Companies can choose from 7,000 ingredients that have already been proven safe. We could, in fact, increase exports to the more than 40 countries that have such a ban in place. Let's quickly look. What does it entail? Animal tests include rubbing substances into shaved backs, dripping substances in their eyes, painting substances in their ears. Other tests, forced inhalation, forced feeding, causing illness and death. If these animals do not die during the testing, they are subsequently killed. How very cruel. No wonder many countries are banning this, including our new best friends, Brazil, India, China. How can the banning of this be declared undesirable at this early stage? It's shocking. We could have then gone and looked into all the issues that the parties have raised. Chairperson, if we had have passed the desirability of this bill, we would send a very powerful message that this would never be tolerated in South Africa. A culture of caring and protecting animals has significant benefits for the well-being of society. Indeed, studies have shown that efforts to reduce cruelty to animals are likely to reduce interpersonal violence in communities. This desirability of this bill would be a benefit to our communities, ravaged by high levels of gender-based violence. And so, sadly, South Africa at the moment scores an E on World Animal Protection Index. This bill would have improved our showing. Chairperson, at least the committee did recognize the need for a holistic approach to the legislation, and I trust, Honourable Minister, that you look carefully at this issue and look at regulating the cosmetic testing of animals. You can do that. You've got that power, the department said. At least let this efforts and all those thousands of public submissions have some bearing. Lastly, I would like to thank the Honourable Tony Rockoven of Beauty Without Cruelty, who is in this House, who has fought this issue for so long, and for all those thousands of people that made public submissions. I don't understand why the DA and other parties oppose the desirability of such a desirable bill. The ACDP will not support this report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The UDM, the ATM, good, the NFP, AIC, COPE, PAC, Al-Jamaa.
Yes, Honorable House Chair, thank you very much. Al-Jamaa does not support this report, and it is unrevolutionary to say that the well-thought-out proposals of the ACDP is undesirable. When you need our prayers at major events of the country to bless the president, to bring about peace, you run to the religions and the religious parties. But when we give good advice in Parliament, you call that undesirable. That is an insult. It is an insult to the liberation movement, and Al-Jamaa rejects this report with a contempt it deserves. However, there is some hope in that the study group that made this recommendation of the ANC has said there should be a more comprehensive bill. And we hope that when that happens, that the well thought out clauses that Honourable Schwartz spent nearly a lifetime on will be included. There is a last minute appeal to members of the ANC to be revolutionary for a change. And when we vote to reject the report, thank you very much.
Thank you. The ANC.
Honorable Chairperson, His Excellency Deputy President, Chief Whip of the Majority Party, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, ngiyanibulisa ngale njikalanga. The ANC rejects the motion of disability of this bill and support the committee recommendations of the report. Our reasons are very clear. There is no gap in the current legislation. Since the department highlighted that there is no testing of cosmetics on animals that is taking place in South Africa. So we can't be preemptive. We rather focus on resources which are human and materials on the current issue that needs our attention. For an example, animal diseases that affects our international trade. The bill narrowly focuses on testing of cosmetics on animals within the border of Republic of South Africa without taking consideration the impact of imported cosmetics. 90% of ingredients used in the manufacturing of cosmetics in the country are imported. The amendment may therefore not achieve its intended purpose if it does not cover imported products as well. A ban limited to testing in South Africa may disadvantage local businesses, whereas allowing multinationals to import similar products into the country without any restriction on animal testing. We therefore believe, House Chair, that the objects of the bill may not provide a significant benefit to the country, but a negative impact on employment in the local cosmetic industry and its development, as well as on international trade. In terms of the Animal Production Index, the World Animal Protection Organization, which has its own standards in which it evaluates animal welfare, has awarded South Africa a score of E on a scale of A to G. The index penalized the country because the definition of animal sentience is not explicit, even though the Animal Protection Act covers aspects of animal sentience in the context. That is why, as the ANC, we agree with submissions that says there is a need for a holistic approach to animal welfare instead of a piecemeal amendment to an outdated piece of legislation, so that such definitions could be corrected to improve the protection index rating. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development have adopted some advisory statements, including that where complete ban on the use of animals to testing cosmetics is not possible, alternatives should be considered, including strengthening the legal requirements for cosmetic safety and encourage the manufacturers to consider alternative method for testing of cosmetics, because these products must be safe when used on humans. Before approval is given to use whole animals, which mostly are laboratory animals for testing of cosmetics, there should be evidence that consideration to other alternative methods has taken place. These methods may include and are not limited to nanotechnology, trace contaminants, and safety assessment. Honorable members, we reiterate that South Africa has no challenge. We don't test cosmetics on animals. As for now, the minister can develop regulations under Section 10 of the Animal Protection Act, Act number 71 of 1962, to address the testing of cosmetic on animals while the comprehensive legislation is being developed. Siyanicela ke bantu bakuthi, sanokukhawulela sisa inkomo zisayosela, lindani kuba kona uminister ubambile umcimbi. Asina crisis apha ekhaya, asithesti izinto kwe-animals. Sanuthatha into zase next door nizenze zethu. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, House Chair. I move that the House adopts this report. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? The DA?
House Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
Please note the objection of the FF Plus.
Please note the objection of the ACDP.
Are there any further objections?
Please note the objection of Al Jama.
Are there any further objections? And with those objections, the report is agreed to. The Secretary will read the ninth order.
Second reading, Animal Protection Amendment Bill.
As there is no list of speakers, I will now put the question. Are there any objections to the bill not being read a second time as recommended by the committee?
House Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
And of the FF Plus.
Please note the objection of the ACDP. Thank you.
Are there any further objections? With those objections noted, the bill is therefore not read a second time. The Secretary will read the 10th order.
Consideration of third request for permission in terms of Rule 286(4)B to inquire into extending the subject of cannabis for private purposes bill.
Honorable members, as there is no list of speakers, I will now put the question. Are there any objections to the committee being granted permission in terms of Rule 284, Section 4, subsection B, to inquire into extending the subject of cannabis for private purposes bill? Are there any objections?
No the objections from Al Jama.
No objections. Honorable Hendricks, I couldn't hear what you said.
Please note the objections of Al Jama.
The objection is noted, and with those objections, the question is agreed to. The Secretary will read the last order of the day.
Consideration of second report of National Assembly Rules Committee on party funding and oversight of electricity portfolio.
I now recognize the Honorable Deputy Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Yeah, for question.
Thank you, House Chairperson, Honorable His Excellency the Deputy President, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Members, I greet you all. On the 12th of September, the National Assembly Rules Committee met to consider a number of issues. Firstly, members will know that the President has established a new Ministry of Electricity. This was an important measure to plan and coordinate government's response to the power crisis. At the same time, Parliament had to decide how best to oversee the new ministry. The Rules Committee has agreed that the ministry should fall within the remit of the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises. This is because the committee already possesses considerable expertise and experience in the sector. Parliamentary scrutiny can certainly contribute to the end load shedding. I should also report that as part of the ongoing efforts to improve parliamentary oversight, the Rules Committee considered the need for rules to complement the Money Bills and Related Matters Act, as well as procedures to regulate petitions and pursue government undertakings in the House. These matters have been duly referred to the subcommittee on the review of the rules. The development of these rules will create new avenues for committees, members, and the public to influence Parliament's proceedings. We must welcome these initiatives, and I would encourage parties to prepare for the pursuant deliberations. Honorable House Chairperson, the third matter which was considered by the Rules Committee concerned rules to regulate funding for represented political parties. The Constitution provides for different types and
and sources of funding. As one such source, Parliament itself provide for the funding in terms of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. Up until now, this has been done in accordance with the policy. Section 57, subsection 2C of the Constitution, however, stipulates that, and I quote, the rules and orders of the National Assembly must provide for financial and administrative assistance to each party represented in the National Assembly in proportion to its representation, close quote. The Assembly does not currently have a rule for this purpose. The Rules Committee therefore recommended that the House adopt a rule to comply with the Constitution. I should stress that this is a technical amendment and will not have a direct impact on the current allocation. Rather, the rule will clarify the process to be followed. Honorable House Chairperson, in conclusion, I am confident that the House will support the recommendation of the Rules Committee. Indeed, the report again highlights that Parliament is at work to improve its procedures and systems to strengthen its status and efficacy as a separate arm of the state and enable the exercise of its constitutional duties. I thank you, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Chief Whip. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration. The DA.
This report dealt with a few matters and as has already been said, the one concerns party funding, and it is quite correct that the rules are now adjusted so that we can also make provision for that in our rules. However, Chairperson, the second matter that I would like to talk to is the Minister of Electricity. When the Minister of Electricity or the portfolio was announced by the President, immediately the DA said, but there should be a specific portfolio committee to exercise oversight. The minister was appointed, but no committee. What then happened was that the whole ministry, the minister, was allocated to a cluster for oral questions and other questions. Well, that is some progress, but it is still not what we need. What we now have is a whole Minister of Electricity being allocated to another portfolio committee on public enterprises. Now, that could be a bit more of a step in the right direction. But Chairperson, the reality in our country is that the single most biggest problem that we have to face that cuts through to our everyday lives on every facet is electricity, or the absolute lack thereof. This is the one portfolio that we need oversight, that we need accountability. Well, just to give you an idea, Chairperson, today it is said that load shedding is going to have a new record in mid-October. The country would have been without power for double the amount of time as in the whole of 2022. So we're not going anywhere. So we can pat ourselves on the shoulder and say, well, at least now this minister will have oversight and has to account to a portfolio committee on public enterprises, but things aren't happening. It's getting worse. And we also have to ask, if it is now part of another portfolio committee, what will be the extent of the oversight? How many times will that portfolio committee focus on the work of that particular minister? Or will it just disappear within the rest of all the other state-owned entities? So, Chairperson, although we support this move, we have to also alert and provide our concerns in terms of this move. What we need is a specific portfolio committee for the Ministry of Electricity, because, as I said, this is the single biggest problem facing our country and our future. Thank you.
The EFF.
Let me take it, Chair. Chairperson, we are presented with the second report of the National Assembly Rules Committee on Rule on Party Funding and Oversight of Electricity Portfolio. As the economic freedom fighters, we welcome the insertion of 266A to address the issue of financial and administrative assistance for political parties. The reality is that for far too long, our democracy has been stifled because of the incorrect funding model for political parties represented here in Parliament. This is because we rely on the executive to introduce legislation and amendments. They will not finance political parties to enhance democracy, as they do not wish to be held accountable. We, Parliament, are responsible for the appropriation of all funds from the National Revenue Fund. Yet we behave as if we are dependent on the National Treasury. This dependence must come to an end. The EFF rejects the decision of the committee to not have a new portfolio committee for oversight of electricity. Instead, it will fall under the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprise. Given the fact that the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprise is already overwhelmed with the task of overseeing struggling entities, this decision appears misguided. Furthermore, the minister who is expected to be accountable to this committee does not take it seriously. As the EFF, we have written to the Speaker to emphasize the need for proper oversight over many of the ministers and commissions that Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa is establishing in the presidency. Among them, the electricity portfolio is significant. We believe there should be a separate committee to address the crisis of electricity. It seems irrational for the ANC to initially reject a recommendation to establish an ad hoc committee to address the electricity crisis and now also reject a standard committee. It is clear that the ANC does not treat this matter with the gravity it deserves. To them, it does not appear to be a crisis. Perhaps this is because they have used taxpayers' money to equip their residences with backup batteries and solar panels. I thank you, Chair.
The IFP.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. In protecting, promoting, and enhancing multi-party democracy in the Republic, the Constitution mandates that national legislation must provide for the funding of political parties participating in national and provincial legislatures on an equitable and proportional basis. This is supported through different types of funding regimes for political parties represented in Parliament, which is executed through different legislations such as the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act and the Party Political Funding Act. Honorable members, as diverse as we are in values, ideologies, and political affiliations, we can all concede that not only is politics an extremely volatile exercise, but it is an expensive one as well. One that unfortunately cannot thrive without extensive and consistent funding, and our laws recognize this. In fact, the Constitution once more in section 57(2) reads that the rules and orders of the National Assembly must provide for financial administrative assistance to each party represented in the National Assembly, in proportion to its representation to enable the party and its leader to perform their functions in the Assembly effectively. Currently, there is a vacuum pertaining to this provision. We therefore cannot afford to have a National Assembly that does not action constitutional provisions. Not only does this speak to the arrogance of this government, but it is also serving as proof of its incompetence and lack of respect for the rule of law. It is completely and utterly unacceptable that Parliament funds political parties in what merely seems like an extension of an afterthought. As the IFP, we strongly believe that it is imperative that the National Assembly adopts the new Rule 266A. This will ensure that the House remains consistent with our legislation and caters for the differing yet common funding challenges that political parties face throughout the spectrum. If ever there was any acknowledgement that the Ministry of Electricity should not have been actually established, it's the fact that now it's an afterthought in that Portfolio Committee of Public Enterprises. Instead of course, we do understand that at the same time, we are opposed to the establishment of the bloated extension of government, particularly the presidency. So maybe in one hand, there is sense in the fact that place it somewhere temporarily because it is a temporary intervention. It is for this reason that we believe that the assignment of a new portfolio committee would have been irrational as the assignment of a new department and might even be counterproductive as it could potentially pose a delay to the real work ahead of the electricity portfolio if there is any work. The IFP supports both of these reports. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chairperson. House Chair, the ANC government announced that they have the solution to load shedding and that they will solve the electricity crisis by creating a new ministry. We all said it's ridiculous. But why is the solution to create a new ministry, but then not that this Parliament, the legislative arm, do oversight over that portfolio? Why does this ANC members in this House not want to do oversight? Why do you want to sit back and just accept what the executive does? You do not understand the checks and balances built into our constitutional democracy. We saw it last week with private members' bills where you say you would rather not amend legislation, you'll have the executive have its secondary legislative mandate and do it with that. We saw it now with the Animal Protection Amendment Bill, where you say the minister must do regulations instead of this legislature doing what it is supposed to do. And the same with this portfolio committee. But at the end of the day, I do agree with the IFP that this is temporary because the solution is not in a new ministry. The solution is to get rid of the ANC government. That is the only solution to the electricity crisis. But if you say, Honourable Chairperson, if you say that there is a budget shortage and that is the reason why we can't create other portfolio committees and that they should rather account to a portfolio committee that's already overburdened, then the solution is also easy, Honourable Chief Whip. The solution is easy. Go oversee less,
Their job
do
to
oversight
oppose.
in the interest of the people out there, cut the catering that people eat here, and do oversight in the interest of the people. That is where the money is. There's no shortage of budget. But even if there's an establishment of a new portfolio committee, the problem is that the ANC majority in this House does not take their oversight role serious. And that is your failure, Chief Whip. I thank you.
The ACDP, order, honourable members.
No declaration, thank you.
No declaration. The UDM. The ATM. Good. The NFP. AIC. COPE. Order, honourable members. Al Jama. The ANC.
House Chair, on the 25th of April 2023, the ANA Rules Committee held an important meeting where we engaged on a number of critical issues arising from both the executive and the judiciary. The appointment of a Minister of Electricity has proven both correct in terms of principle and application in dealing with the challenges of power supply and load shedding. Once the appointment had been made, the matter for the ANC of accountability and reporting lines had to be addressed in the context of the nature and the character of the appointment. It was no ordinary appointment, but a very specific one. The President's announcement on the 6th of May 2023, when he announced a Minister of Electricity, was made in the context that just over a year remained in the term of the 6th administration, and that changes of the executive should not be just an overhaul. The Minister for Electricity, his task is to deal with the immediate crisis of load shedding, a crisis that was addressed in the February State of the Nation address. That our most immediate task is to dramatically reduce the severity of load shedding during 2023 and 2024. The Minister of Electricity focused on the full and urgent implementation of the Energy Action Plan, and that has been agreed between government, ESCOM, and other stakeholders. The primary task of the Minister of Electricity is to significantly reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding as a matter of urgency and effectively oversee the electricity crisis response. The Minister has political responsibility, authority, and control over all critical aspects of the Energy Action Plan. So in this context, it makes the Minister of Electricity different from other ministers. By way of structure, it is very different. It has no department, unlike other ministers. It has no staff, unlike other departments. Instead, it makes use of the personnel in the presidency who are part of the National Electricity Crisis Team. By way of budget, it is very different. It has no budget and relies on the administrative budget of the presidency vote one. It does not have a strategic 5-year plan, but rather it has an immediate program over the next 2 years, very short term in nature. It does not have an annual performance plan like all other departments, but it is a program within the presidency. With regards to accountability and ANC's input to the NA Rules Committee meeting provided, this is the Minister of Electricity accountability takes place under the State of the Nation address. Quarterly questions to the President, quarterly questions to the Deputy President, regular reports from the Presidency, the debate on vote one in terms of the budget vote. Further, in respect of the standalone accounting from the Minister of Electricity, he answers questions once a quarter under economic cluster of ministers, as well as debates and ministerial statement that he issues. In addition, on a weekly basis, more than any other minister, he accounts to the nation on the progress. Talk of oversight, there you have it. In summary, there are no less than 7 points of accountability that take place in Parliament to account for the program that the Minister of Electricity has a responsibility under the presidency. Of course, the DA, realizing it had been outmaneuvered, hastily 9 days later after the NA Rules Committee said no to establishing a portfolio committee for the Minister of Electricity, in a mini plenary on the 4th of May, tabled a motion for debate on the establishment of the ad hoc committee. They still want this, even though all of the evidence that I've highlighted above and the progress on maintenance, restoration of sources, power, sourcing external additional power supply, and all of that. Besides that, they still just want an ad hoc committee. They seem to be in love with an ad hoc committee. We don't have work for their love for the ad hoc committee. Correctly, the NA committee said no as outlined in the report table today. In saying no, the ANC argued, using evidence-based facts, our philosophy of accountability as supported by the rules, as opposed to a narrative of non-accountability and just a mere wanting of an ad hoc committee. Finally, on the matter of the rules for party funding, we have over the years operated within the provisions of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act and the political party funding, but without rules of the National Assembly to provide for financial and administrative assistance to each party represented in the National Assembly in proportion to its own strength. The new draft rule addresses this and includes the category of independent candidates. The EFF comes in the House being absent together with FF Plus in the Rules Committee. You would have been more engaged and more exposed in terms of this discussion, because the matters you are raising here were engaged fully in our Rules Committee, and therefore we cannot really be entertaining your absence in terms of these kind of issues. As of oversight, the ANC leads in the oversight in this sixth parliament. Every committee that you have, if the ANC would not be there virtually would not be any oversight. And I say this being part of a number of committees where we're able to see and demonstrate that the ANC supports this report. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I move that the House adopts this report. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections.
So the rejection of the EFF.
With that objection, the report is agreed to. Honourable members, I now request you to stand and wait for the chair and the mace to leave the chamber. That concludes the business for the day and the House is adjourned.